Normandie Golf Course in St. Louis. Opened in 1901, it is the oldest public 18-hole course west of the Mississippi River. As such, the Normandy is one of only a few courses in the nation where the public can experience the brilliant peculiarities of 19th century golf design. Its rolling fairways, its forbidding water hazards, and its extensive collection of local flora have attracted generations of St. Louisans to its links. Even national golfing champions like Babe Diedrichson and Alex Zaharias, seen here on the course in the late 30s, considered Normandy a favorite. But in July of 2004, St. Louis was shocked to read that the course's owners were selling the property to a major local developer, Taylor-Morley Homes. And in no time, Taylor-Morley expressed its intention to build 500 housing units and even a retail strip on top of the old course. The Normandy would be flattened out, most of its trees cut down, and the nation would lose an important historical landmark. This film attempts to reveal how and why this tragic situation came about. The Normandy Golf Course is located just northwest of the city of St. Louis, between Natural Bridge and St. Charles Rock Roads. In the mid-1800s, the area was still very rural, but as the 20th century approached, available land was becoming increasingly scarce as the population of St. Louis skyrocketed. The Glen Echo Country Club would come first, opening in April 1901. The Normandy quickly followed, opening that October. Both courses were designed by brothers Robert and Jim Folis, who both together and separately designed dozens of courses in the United States around the turn of the century. Their father, James Folis Sr., was foreman at Tom Morris's shop at St. Andrews in Scotland, the world's oldest golf shop at the world's oldest golf course. The Folis brothers carefully laid out the Normandy on the 120-acre J.B.C. Lucas estate. Many of the holes were designed with deep valleys and elevated greens. And while the course was still surrounded by countryside when it was built, things would soon change. In the 1920s, the land north of the course was purchased by the Nickmeyer and Fleer Realty Company, which planned for a bucolic subdivision named Belnor. The grand entrance, built along Natural Bridge Road, did just the trick in luring families who were fleeing the crowded north side of the city. Over the next couple of decades, the subdivision filled in with neat cottages and bungalows. In 1937, the subdivision officially incorporated as the village of Belnor. In the 1940s, land to the east of the course was platted out. This area was incorporated as the city of Greendale in 1950. The fates of the village of Belnor and the city of Greendale are tied very closely with the Normandy Golf Course.
The significance of the Normandy Golf Club to the city of Greendale is that our entire city faces that golf course. It is the only significant green space left in this entire area. The 7 or 8 streets that we have that are major empty into that golf course. It is the first thing people see in the morning when they wake up. If they live right across the street from the golf course, and we have, I guess, about 20 homes or so that face the golf course directly, have big picture windows, perfectly situated to see this marvelous, beautiful golf course with their morning coffee, or sitting there talking on the telephone, or just visiting with neighbors or whatever. It is a tranquil, wonderful, comforting, gorgeous piece of property that we want to see stay the way it is. People walk up and down those streets for exercise. You see babies being pushed in strollers by their parents. You see senior citizens having their nice walk for the day. And mostly what they do, besides looking down in front of them, is look across the street at the golf course, because it's just beautiful.
Most citizens were outraged at the thought of losing the old golf course.
We are not really against the developer that's moving in here. We don't, in that particular company, we don't want any developers coming in, moving in on the golf course. It is an essential part of our community. the history of it is so rare to have that type of gem amongst us, and that's why a lot of people live here basically because of the insulation that the golf course and some of the other institutions around us offer. And we were talking before about community, and one thing about Belnor and this area is I think that the type of community we have is the ideal that people are striving for. The racial balance, the different generations, old, young, rich, poor, and everybody seems for the most part to get along. And I think that that's what we all want, and that's what we want for our children. And I've lived in Normandy, in different parts of Normandy my whole life, except for a while when we first got married, and I wanted to come back here. And that's one thing you'll find in this community is generations of people, brothers, sisters, grandmas, grandpas, people that have stayed and young people coming back. And one other thing I would like to say, of the people that have moved out of our community away to the west, to the suburbs, they still consider this home. And they always come back to here. So, and they come back to be buried from here also. So I really think that this is what they consider home. And we have had more and more people wanting that again and coming back to this area. So that's why we're all fighting this type of development in our community.
I've lived in Belnor since 1978, raised my family here. Very happy with the community. We love the golf course. We love the spring of the year when the golfers come out. We love the winter to walk in the snow and for the kids to go on the sleigh rides on the golf course. It's been a very integral part of our psyche, our community. The age of the course has meant a lot to the community for such a long time. For not all the non-golfers, all the little old ladies that were at this meeting and other meetings that never play golf and will never, they don't know a putter from a driver. But they just love the golf course because it soothes them. It makes them feel that comfortable and very much at ease. If it's gone, they have a sense of loss which was irreplaceable. You can't put a value on it. It's worth tens of thousands of dollars to these people, and they're so upset. Believe me, I know. I talk to them all the time. They're so upset they can't sleep at night. So the law to feel that a Northwest County developer is going to come in here and tell us what we need for our community is ridiculous, because we know what we need, and we don't need 500 houses that look all the same that have no brick in them at all. So I'm adamantly opposed to it, and I've been working the best I can in opposition of it. I'm very proud of my opposition because it's just the wrong idea.
And what about the plan to build retail along busy St. Charles Rock Road?
About 2 miles west of this property is a strip mall that's not more than a year or two old, and there's a grocery store in it and a nail salon place and a tax preparation place in it, but that's about it. It's not full. It's not even, other than the retails, other than the grocery store, it's about 25% occupied, maybe 30% occupied. So it's basically not filled up at all, and it's a brand new strip center just sitting there. So it's if they're talking about adding a strip center on this golf course, the residents here know that's folly. They just know it won't go, and there's not enough stores that would want to go into that area.
In fact, there are many underperforming commercial properties all around the Normandy Golf Course. Huge empty shells line most of the area's major thoroughfares, which begs the question, where is the urgent need to develop this golf course into a commercial property? It would definitely be a financial gamble, and if the odds are right, in a few years, this area will have yet one more empty commercial eyesore and one less nationally significant piece of open space. The loss of the Normandy Golf Course is perhaps most disheartening when taking into consideration all of the landmarks the St. Louis area has already lost. Sportsman's Park, for instance, was an 1893 steel giant that was tightly packed into its North Grand neighborhood, reminiscent of Chicago's Wrigley Field. It housed 2 Major League Baseball teams longer than any other ballpark in the nation, serving both the Browns and the Cardinals for 33 years. It was demolished in the late 1960s, shortly after Busch Stadium was built downtown. Then there was the arena, or as it was affectionately known by locals, the barn. Completed in 1929, its innovative roof design provided unobstructed views from all of its 20,000 seats. For many decades, it served as a prototype for how stadia around the world would be constructed. But its contribution to architecture could not save it either. It was imploded in 1999. Downtown, there was the massive Ambassador Theater building. Built with the largest movie screen in the world, it was torn down in 1996 to make way for a neighboring building's plaza. The Century Building was an 1898 behemoth sheathed in Georgia marble that was the longtime home of Scruggs Vandervoort Barney, St. Louis's most prestigious department store. It was raised in late 2004 for a parking garage, despite the fact that many existing downtown parking garages rarely fill to capacity. There was the Lincoln Trust Building, the Children's Building, the Marquette Hotel, the City Hospital Tower, the York Hotel, the Silk Exchange Building, Visitation Academy, St. Philomena School and Orphanage, the historic riverfront that was leveled for the Gateway Arch. And then there was the thousands upon thousands of homes and apartment buildings that once stood on the hundreds of vacant blocks throughout the city, and the once thriving neighborhood commercial districts that have been reduced to ruins, and the factories once buzzing with activity that have been silenced, and the shuttered old churches. St. Louis is slowly losing so much of what links it to its grand past. Why is this? What is so unique about the St. Louis area that its built heritage is seemingly always in jeopardy? The answer lies in three indicia that set St. Louis apart from other cities around the country. 1. It's one of the most balkanized cities in the country. 2. It's one of the most racially segregated cities in the country. And 3. It's one of the most sprawling cities in the country. In their own way, each of these superlatives has greatly affected the Normandie Golf Course and its surroundings. Let's first discuss the balkanization of St. Louis. Glance at any map of the St. Louis area and you'll wonder why it's so darn colorful. Tiny little squares everywhere, especially in the area around the Normandie Golf Course. Those little squares are actually cities, each and every one, with their own mayors, their own commissioners, their own public works, their own fire and police departments. Many of these places are so tiny they must tax heavily for these basic services. And only a few can provide so-called perks like parks and libraries. How did this illogical, haphazard, and wasteful pattern develop? To answer that question, we have to go back to the 1870s when St. Louis had no suburbs. The city of St. Louis was one of the fastest growing cities in the entire nation, as well as one of the densest. Its national importance was highlighted when it was chosen as the location of the Eads Bridge in 1874, the first bridge to cross the mighty Mississippi.
The city of St. Louis was prosperous in the 1870s. It was doing very well. But it didn't have control of its own destiny, and that really upset it. And the two critters that were in its way were the state of Missouri, rural folks by and large, and St. Louis County, of which it was then a part. And St. Louis County was also controlled by the rural interest within the county. This was well before one person, one vote, and land was more represented in legislatures, both state and local, than people were. And so the city took advantage of a constitutional convention in 1875 to rewrite the Missouri Constitution. They developed their own caucus and got the rest of the rural Missouri to go along with it. And they essentially wrote into that Constitution, if you will, a sub-constitution that dealt with the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County, that among other things gave the city of St. Louis the right to separate itself from St. Louis County and to become a city and county unto itself.
County government controlled the purse so that the expenditures collected primarily in the city, these county judges, as they called them in those days, they'd be commissioners now, these county judges were spending the money on building up the county areas where they lived. And so the protest was the taxpayers in the city. I'd say not the ordinary person, but the big taxpayers wanted to separate from the county.
Part of the provision was that the city, if it separated itself from the county, could actually expand its boundaries before it did that. And it did so. It went out roughly another mile and a half on all sides, thinking that that would give it ample room for growth for the foreseeable future. Well, it turned out the foreseeable future was about 20 years. And so you're right, by the early 20th century, the city had reached its limits and then wanted to go further and couldn't because the county was separate from the city, and the city had made that happen.
So the city finally ridded itself of the freeloading county folk, and in the process become the first home rule city in the nation. Sure, the city boundaries were frozen forevermore, but those frozen boundaries were still way out in the boondocks. And anyway, who could possibly worry about St. Louis's future in the late 19th century? The city had become the it place to be. Its phenomenal growth had propelled it ahead of most of its eastern rivals to become the fourth largest city in the nation by 1900.
This was all the future great city of the world theme, and the publicist behind that. They even had support, believe it or not, for moving the national capital from the Chicago Tribune, who wanted it moved out here. And what happened in the East, of course, the eastern areas didn't want it, and they started building a lot of new buildings in Washington immediately when that was first talked of.
Although St. Louis's attempts to become the national capital were thwarted, it would soon play host to the world. The 1904 World's Fair, dubbed the Louisiana Exposition in commemoration of the centennial of the Louisiana Purchase, was the largest event of its kind ever. The city's Forest Park was transformed into a dream city that highlighted the then popular Beaux-Arts style of architecture and urban design. St. Louis certainly enjoyed its status as a metropolis of national import as the World's Fair concluded, but its 1875 decision to divorce itself from the county would soon haunt it. As we saw before, by the 1920s, development had reached the city's border, and since the city could not expand its territory by 1 inch, it had to sit idly by the sidelines and watch the county, from which it was permanently detached, accommodate all of the new growth. As development spilled into the county, new cities incorporated. At the time of the separation, St. Louis County needed a new county seat since it had just suddenly found itself without one. Clayton was chosen on account of Ralph Clayton and Martin Hanley's donation of land for a courthouse. Over the ensuing decades, Clayton was joined by dozens and dozens of neighbors. Sometimes tiny, sometimes large, these cities were